Welcome to the Society with Fatma Shaheen at PTV World. They say that divorce is not just a personal issue, rather it is a societal one. It is that one issue that reflects upon not only the values but the challenges that any society then does face. Which is why today on our show we'll be talking about not only divorce per se but also of course the post-divorce aftermath that divorced couples, rather particularly women, they do undergo. In this regard we'll be talking about not only the socio-economic consequences of divorce upon women, but also, of course, the long, the costly, and of course, the tedious legal battles that they do have to fight post-divorce so as to get so many issues settled down. In this regard, we'll also be delving upon, the devastating psychological impact of divorce on couples, again, more particularly on women as well in this regard. And we'll be talking about, generally the work of the government, more particularly when it comes to the work of FOSPA, that is the Federal Ombudsperson for Protection Against Harassment of Women, which, as we all understand, also has that additional mandate so as to, uphold rights of women, more particularly help them acquire access to land in the event that they do come up to them. In this regard, we'll not only be talking about, the positive developments that we do see happening in our society in this regard, but also, of course, the need for there to be more reform in terms of perhaps having better laws and policies which then cater to looking after, financial compensation for women, that too post-divorce, and of course by that yardstick also giving them an equal and equitable share when it comes to a division of the matrimonial assets. All of this today, that too with an extremely relevant panel. Let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for today's show is Ms. Huma Ijaz. She's a legal and a policy expert. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Huma. Alongside her, I have Hassam Mahmood, who is a psychotherapist. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. My third panelist for today's show is Ms. Yameen Hassan. She's a youth activist and she's also a social worker. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. And via telephone line, we'll be joined by Ms. Fauzia Wakar, who is a women rights activist, and as we all know, she's also the Federal Ombudsperson for Protection Against Harassment of Women. Assalamu alaikum, madam, and welcome to the show. Now, before we start the discussion on today's topic, let's have a look at this brief report.
In today's progressive world, it's vital to ensure that women are empowered and protected, especially after life-altering events like divorce. Currently, Pakistan lacks a post-divorce maintenance regime, leaving many women vulnerable to financial hardships. But there is a bright path ahead. By proposing new laws that guarantee an equitable share in matrimonial assets, we can uplift divorced women, giving them the stability and confidence they need to thrive. Empowering women doesn't stop there. Therapy and counseling can play a crucial role in helping divorced couples integrate into society, ensuring emotional well-being and a smoother transition to their new lives. Organizations like FOSPA are already leading the change in women's empowerment. They work tirelessly to protect women's property rights, ensuring that every woman gets what she is legally entitled to. Together, through legal reform and social support, we can create a society where divorced women are not just survivors, but thrivers.
Welcome back. And now to get the conversation started with you, Ms. Fauzia, when we do talk about post-divorce, we need to at a very basic level then understand that, what exactly does the post-divorce regime then comprise of, more particularly for women. We do understand the fact, and not only in one, rather in quite a few Muslim countries, be it Iran, be it Qatar, be it Turkey for that matter, women are given some kind of financial compensation, even rights in matrimonial assets post-divorce. But do we see that happening in Pakistan? How would you make that comparison in this regard, and where do you feel is that room for improvement?
Women's rights in marriage can better be safeguarded through a matrimonial property regime, because any property acquired or held together by husband and wife during the validity of marriage can play a critical part in the political and socio-economic empowerment of women. So in the cases where a woman is given a unilateral divorce by the man, she should have access to two kinds of supports. One being matatul talaq, which means maintenance after marriage, or as it is called in the Western world, alimony. Similarly, the other way in which the woman's rights can be guaranteed include the matrimonial property, which means that the property which was acquired at the time of marriage is equally divided between both spouses. There is the concept of mata given originally, mata meaning matatul talaq, the maintenance, that is given in Surah Baqarah, especially verse 2, ayah 241, in which says, for divorced women, maintenance should be provided on a reasonable scale. This is a duty on the righteous. Other Islamic scholars have also interpreted the mentioned verse on the same lines when they say, and for the divorced women, let there be a fair provision. This is an obligation on those who are mindful of God. In various Islamic countries, within the family laws, like countries like Iran, Egypt, Qatar, Malaysia, Morocco, etc., post-divorce maintenance can be awarded to women for up for 3 years. In Iran, there is a concept of ujratul misl, which is equivalent to post-divorce maintenance, under which the husband is bound to pay to the wife compensation for 3 years if she is not at fault and not responsible for divorce. Similarly, Indonesia's marriage law also maintains that any property acquired during the marriage shall become joint property, and the property brought into the marriage by the husband and wife respectively, or acquired by them as a gift or inheritance, can remain in their respective control unless they mutually decide by the party. Similarly, in Turkey also it is provided that any property acquired during marriage must be joint by default, unless the spouses agree to another arrangement provided by law. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, there is no such guarantee given to a woman, even though there was a discussion when Muslim family laws were being made. There was a discussion that women should not be divorced unilaterally, and they should have some rights or rights including maintenance as well as perhaps matrimonial property. But there was active opposition to this particular recommendation, and currently, even when there is no fault divorce or there is a fault based divorce, the woman gets nothing. So therefore the financial consequences are significant for a woman, and she walks away with nothing.
On which I would want you to add to further. Now, she has been pointed towards the situation as it does exist in the other Muslim countries. But coming back to Pakistan, we do understand that a law is in the process of being proposed, one which very specifically caters to the financial vulnerabilities of women post-divorce. So could you please tell us that, what are the salient features of this law?
To introduce this draft legislation, which has taken like 3 years to be prepared, because the issue is that we had to go through research, as Fauzia correctly pointed out, with various Muslim countries and various common law jurisdictions.
Right.
Especially various Muslim countries was our reference point. So this law is the salient features of this law is, it's a simple going to be an amendment to Muslim family law. It's a
Right.
proposed amendment, and it says that from the day that a husband and a man and a woman gets married, they are a partnership. They have entered into a contract of partnership of living together, of earning everything together. So the concept is that even if she stays at home and looks after the children, the family, all his needs, to give him a peaceful environment and a peaceful mind, that he goes out and works.
Right.
And he works, so she is contributing. She is
Right.
earning her wages.
Right.
As Fauzia said, that it's called earned wages, the way it is in Iran.
Basically making up that family, even giving up her career for that matter, that is something which is given recognition in the law.
Yes, by the way, it is not given a recognition, being that whether she works or she doesn't work, a woman
Either ways. Okay.
is contributing always more than the husband. So she is also bearing children, which he's not, and she is also bringing them up, which he's not, because she's the one who takes time off. Even with her work, she is
Right.
managing children, home.
Right.
The law is clearly, it gives a direction to the courts that from the day that they are married, and if no fault of her own, there is a divorce in which he unilaterally decides, I don't like her anymore, I want to divorce her for whatever reason. And no fault divorce is also defined,
Right.
because in Muslim family law there are all these divorces, the reasons, the grounds given. And once that happens, then the court will give her her due share in the property which has been made from the day that they got married.
Right.
Not the property which he made before marriage.
Right.
Not the property which
She
he
gets an
inherited
inheritance, right.
either post-marriage or pre-marriage.
Right.
Not the gifts which are given to him either the pre-marriage or post-marriage.
Right. Indeed, that's very rightly put by yourself, madam. So it would be fair to say that, you know, then the contribution of wife to matrimonial assets, that in itself will be recognized, whether she's a spouse, whether she's a parent, whether she's a wage earner, and this in turn will, of course, you know, economically empower her to post-divorce. On which I'll come to you, sir, and I would want you to add to this, but more so from your own, you know, mental health perspective. So when we do talk about the devastating impact of divorce, that too on divorced couples, more particularly on women, what are the most glaring effects of the same on them? Because we do also understand the fact, studies suggest that, you know, when it comes to women, they are more prone to, you know, falling back into some kind of a self-identity crisis, or suffer from basic self-identity issues, or lack of self-confidence issues too, for that matter.
All right. First of all, thank you for having me
You're
here.
most welcome.
And there is a huge difference in terms of the impact. In general, because of the narrative around divorce that surrounds women in this country, the emotional aftermath is worse
Right.
for women, and it could include having feelings of unworthiness, sense of loss of direction,
A loss of identity
a loss
too.
of identity, and even guilt and self-blame, thinking that they have failed in some way, and that could be really, really devastating. And it doesn't impact men as much because of the double standard there,
Right.
and because of the narrative that pushes this idea that divorce is especially somehow bad for women.
Right. You basically, divorced women are tabooed that way more as
Yeah.
opposed to men. But when it comes to intervening and giving them timely help, what kind of interventions turn out to be more effective? At times we see that, you know, psychotherapists like yourself, you do resort to individual counseling, but then we also see, and this is something which has, you know, overall become more popular over the years, that there's group therapy, so to speak, as well. So which do you feel is most effective when it comes to treating patients post-divorce?
Yeah, so they all have something to offer, and it comes down to the individual and what stage they're at for choosing what would work best. So the group therapy element, it's really helpful to have a sense of community when there are group therapy sessions for women, there are support groups led by therapists. That's very accessible, so you don't have to share too much, and you can go in there and have these people around you who are going through the same thing. It adds to a sense of community and support, and could be the easiest way to start for some people.
Right. You better connect with people around you when you
Yeah.
see people suffering and having the same experiences as yours that way.
Exactly, and when they feel that they're ready to maybe dive a bit deeper into their suffering, one-on-one therapy can help.
Right.
And even within one-on-one therapy, they do have options in terms of what kind of therapy they'd like. Some are very structured and goal-oriented, and others are more long-term, and they kind of go at a slower pace, and they
Basically, the kind of therapy that you would want to prescribe to anybody would then vary from case to case, on which I'll come to you, Ms. Amy, and I want you to add to this further. So when we do talk about overall the impact of divorce, more particularly on younger women, how would you compare and contrast it with the impact that, you know, divorce generally has on perhaps older middle-aged women? Because for one, we do understand the fact that, you know, younger women getting divorced would definitely give them more stress and put them, of course, in a more vulnerable economic position as well, because they perhaps might not be that financially sound. But on the contrary, it might also give them better chances to, you know, advance in their careers too, because they are young, they have that time.
So Fatma, there has been a change in trends over the past 20 years regarding attitudes towards divorce. Young girls in today's times are more educated, more aware about their rights, and also more financially independent, so to say. So they are not that impacted by divorce as the women were like 20-30 years ago. Also there was a stigmatization around divorce. It's like as if it's a blot on the character or a blot on their, you know, social standing, etc. But those kinds of attitudes, since they are changing, women today are now okay with divorces that you know, it's sometimes two people might be good but they might not be good
Right.
to each other, and it's okay to separate and, you know, seek other avenues to further their respective, you know, careers, personalities, etc. So that exactly that positive change is now opening new opportunities. Women are now okay to remarry. There's also a changed attitude in men as well. They are more accepting towards
Divorced
the
women as well.
far
That
as
is
I
also
have
another trend that we do observe in the Pakistan
Exactly.
society. Although we generally do see, and this is something that I'm quoting from a British publication, that, you know, women who do perhaps better in their careers, especially those who make it to the top managerial positions, who are perhaps CEOs of companies or different organizations, they are perhaps more likely to get divorced. But that, you know, then again, this is something which is there globally. I think it has to do with the mindset overall, so to speak. On which I'll come to you, Ms. Fauzi, and I would want you to add to this further. So overall, when we do talk about the socio-economic consequences of divorce, that too on divorced women, how would you detail those to be, especially in the case where women are, you know, comparatively young, where they are uneducated, and where they have, for no reason of their own or no fault of their own, been unjustly divorced?
In Pakistan, the status of women is inferior to that of men. There is inequality not just in terms of outcomes for women, but also in other indicators like their resources that they own, the education that they receive, and their ability to make decisions for themselves. Marriage, in marriage there is a lack of matrimonial property regime, because of which women, when they are divorced unilaterally without any fault of their own, in many cases they have to walk out without any resources, without any financial assets, and also because of a protracted period in marriage have been unable to accumulate wealth of their own, given even if they started off with better education.
That's indeed very rightly put by yourself, madam. But moving on here, we must also talk about the domain of FOSPA, especially when it comes to protecting and upholding women's property rights, which of course become more of an imminent challenge post-divorce, because as we all understand, post-divorce Pakistani women, they do not get a share in matrimonial assets. So in this regard, how would you explain the working of FOSPA, and how easy is it for any Pakistani women out there so as to access your office and to get their property rights enforced?
The Federal Ombudsperson Secretariat has two parts of its mandate. One is to protect women, men, and transgendered persons from harassment at the workplace. The second mandate is to protect the property rights of women in Islamabad Capital Territories. This property can be inherited, or it can be self-created. It can be movable or immovable in the form of, for instance, cash, jewelry, saving certificates, etc. And in that, when a woman is denied by fraud or by just outright denial her rights in property, over which she has a clear title to, that she can access the Ombudsperson either through our helpline, the number of which is 0344 367 367, or simply write a quick brief, if she wants to, message on our online complaints form, which is given on fospa.gov.pk. She can also come to us in person, and she can send a complaint through post also. What FOSPA does is that it hears the case, and it not only helps in getting the property transferred in the names of all the heirs or in the names of all the rightful owners, but it also, with the assistance of district administration and the police, gets possession of that property for women.
On which, Ms. Huma, I'll come to you, and I would want you to add to this, but more so from the viewpoint of the proposed law. So overall, when we do talk about the proposed law, I think one thing which definitely needs clarification is the role of the court. So does the court then just play the role of a mediator, or does it, just go by whatever the parties decide as regards the distribution of the matrimonial assets?
The court will not play the role of somebody discretionary here. The court will look at the assets. Those assets, they will have to be shown by either party that this is what we made, and the court will divide it 50-50. Only in cases where the parties themselves come to an agreement regarding the division of assets, they can enter that as a settlement in court as a decree. and the court can decree it.
Right.
Otherwise, the court has this, the role of the court is that those assets are like on books, that this is a car, this is a house that we have made. So the court will divide them, furniture, everything, the court will divide them or the value of it.
Right.
And this is what the court will do.
Right. But when we talk about so many myths which do surround this piece of law, one of them that I would want to put to you, and others you can raise yourself as well, is the fact at the cost of financially empowering women, we just can't ensure that they are unjust outcomes for men too. What about issues when it comes to, division of their premarital assets? What about issues when it comes to, issues of their inheritance estate? So how do you as a lawyer supporting this law would then debunk this myth? And also, of course, about the very important fact that when it comes to divorcing women, how does this law indirectly also prevent divorce? Because if people know that there are financial consequences to follow, then they would perhaps think twice before divorcing their wives.
Fatma, you're absolutely correct. Actually, this law will be like a deterrent for divorce. Men at the whim and their wish just cannot divorce, because there has to be some liability. And when they think about the liability, they'll think twice. They'll also not treat a woman cruelly, because there's a lot of cruelty in marriage, whether it's emotional abuse, whether it's financial abuse, whether it's physical abuse. So they will think twice, because they will know if she works out, and if I do all these things, then there's a price I have to pay for it. So I personally, and the people who have helped me draft this law or helped us, now come out with it, is everybody. This was the main criticism. It's actually going to be a proponent of marriage.
Exactly.
Actually, families will not
strengthen the relationship of marriage.
The relationship. The second part is, if she is monetarily well off, even if she is divorced, her children will benefit from it, because then she'll have a home to provide for them. Rather than being in the streets or living at the in-laws or living at her own parents, she will actually be providing a safe space to them and be able to provide it, because financial independence is very important. And secondly, this is very fair, because at the outset I said, it's been carved out. No inheritance is included in it of the male. No premarital assets are included in it. These are only the marital assets during the marriage, whatever you make.
Right.
But this is Sharia compliant, as has been pointed out by Fauzia just now, that there are surahs which mention that make a settlement on the women that you decide to leave, or who decide to leave you. Make a settlement, a fair settlement. So how that settlement is made is left to the jurisprudence of the times.
Right.
And today's jurisprudence tells us this. And let me just add one more thing. It's Islamic jurisprudence as well as legal jurisprudence, which you very well know, that everything is Sharia compliant as long as it's not contrary to any provisions. And you can also add on, like for example in inheritance, the minimum share is provided in Quran. Legally it's provided, a girl will get this, boy will get, he'll get twice as much as a girl, as a daughter. So, but it does not refrain you from giving more than what is written. That's the minimum that is to be given. In your lifetime, you can give her much more.
Right, madam. On which I'll come to you, Ms. Fauzia, and I think here something that we would like to put to you is the fact that, overall we also see this practice where, in cases more than one property disputes amongst women, they are very amicably sorted out. In this regard, I was reading about this case that came to your very office, where particularly male members of a family very gratuitously and very amicably transferred the property in the name of the female members of their very family too. So when it comes to amicably solving all these issues, how particularly does FOSFA facilitate people, more particularly Pakistani masses, in the same?
In a lot of cases, when families realize that they cannot deny the right which is predetermined, especially in inheritance, and it is clear in the law, they come to terms and they settle. At FOSPA, we make it very clear that the rights are of the women and the men, everyone, the siblings, they are guaranteed. Since they are predetermined, so there is no doubt about it. and therefore we help with the settlement. Recently, the case that you're referring to, when land was transferred amicably to female family members by their male members, that is an example. It's a classic example. I can tell you with assurance that over 50% of the cases now get resolved amicably and on the terms that the complainant, who is a woman, has asked for, because her title is clear, and when the families realize that the state is standing behind her demand for her right, and the families come to settle quite early. And therefore, we've had a lot of success in helping families give rights to their women.
These are the cases that we definitely do need to highlight then, so as to encourage perhaps more women to approach your office and to get their rights enforced. On which I'll come to you, Hassam Sahab. I think here we must also talk about this from this very common myth that we do come across in our society, which is that, you know, divorce is always a negative thing. A lot of times we also see, not at the cost of course, encouraging divorce at any cost, but we do see that when people walk out of abusive and toxic relationships, they become a better version of themselves. So how do you, as mental health care professional, inculcate this very basic sense of thinking into, you know, the people that you come across? Because I think people like you also, you know, then have that power over individuals who come to you.
Right, and if you think about the fact that this option exists across the world in all legal and religious systems, that says something, right? That says that it's there because it can be beneficial too, right? So like you said, there are relationships and situations in which the two people might just not be good for each other, and also maybe not for the children. And I've seen examples in my own relatives where when the parents were divorced, it actually turned out better for both of them and the child, because the system was the way it should. And the other question you asked about how therapists can play a role in the decision-making process, I think they can play a really big role, because when somebody comes to you and they're contemplating a relationship breakdown or divorce, there amazing tools out there that can help you through the decision-making process, so that you can...
And people like yourself, you can actually streamline that entire process, basically, because I think a lot of times people are very confused as to which way and which path to follow. So how do you particularly do just that? Because then again, you can't be held responsible for, you know, encouraging somebody to end wedlock as well. It's a very fine balance that you need to strike.
Exactly. And the first step is always to understand where the person is coming from, to show empathy for their position. And once we've understood that, we tell them that they're in control, right? So they would make the decision, and it would be their decision. The role I would play is that of a supportive guide, who is just providing that environment in which they can use the tools to think more clearly about the situation, and to dig deep and find what their value system is, and just guide them through whatever their journey is, and not impose, like you said, because that would be very unethical.
Of course, that would be extremely unethical, and also perhaps, you know, at some level give them that time to introspect. Make sure that whatever they do is their decision, but you actually make them aware of the consequences both ways. Coming towards you, Yameen, I think here we must also talk about the impact of social media. Now, we do understand the fact that yes, social media at a very basic level has improved our communication, but then again, of course, there is this school of thought that too in our society that at some level or the other, it has also triggered the divorce rate. So as a young female, would you agree with this?
So I would say that social media is a double-edged sword, where it has helped women get out of toxic marriages. It has also proved to be troublesome for stable marriages, where women, you know, having exposure to stories about other women have been incited to, you know, go for divorce. Because see, I believe as a youth activist, I believe that there is always an area for improvement and an area for communicating the differences out. But that idea of, you know, that narrative that, okay, if you are not being able to adjust, it's you know, it's the best way to walk out. I think that has, you know, shunned the prospects of, you know, managing the relationship. And you know, given a way to more divorces.
Then again, we do need to consider this in the context of course, Pakistani dramas too. There is criticism raised with regards to the narrative that is then presented in our dramas when it comes to divorce per se. So as a young Pakistani yourself, how do you feel can this narrative then change so as to better educate people, more particularly young men, with regards to perhaps the drastic consequences of divorcing their wives, that too in a very arbitrary manner?
So there is this debate amongst the postmodernists that media helps and plays a lot of role in sort of formulating your opinions, your ideas and everything. As far as Pakistani medias, Pakistani shows are concerned, they do further that stigmatization of divorce, where they do portray a divorcee as maybe somebody negative, or maybe somebody who was unable to make a marriage work. So all of that, particularly when it comes to women, all of the blame is put on to them. So in this area, to me, there is a lot of improvement that is needed, because such kind of portrayal of divorcees kind of puts a strain, a social strain of divorcees,
a social stigma
that
as
then
well.
Feel, you know, invalidated in real life, and also feel, you know, have to face a lot of barriers.
It actually kind of, you know, perpetuates that social bias against them.
Exactly,
Right, you mean, your point is
exactly.
noted. Coming towards you, Ms. Huma, and moving towards the end of the show. So overall, if we are to wrap up today's conversation, yes, we do understand that this progressive piece of law that is in the making. But when we talk about the practicalities, what kind of cultural impediments, socio-cultural impediments, what kind of practical challenges may we face when it comes to practically implementing this piece of law?
First of all, I feel that a lot of people will welcome it. At least your 50% of the population, which is the women folk of this country, will welcome it. And then the 25% of the men who are their fathers or their brothers or their sons, they will welcome it. So there is a 25% which will oppose it. And they need not oppose it, because the thing is, what is our constitution guarantees? The right to dignity. And the right to dignity of a woman is equal to the right to dignity of a man.
Right.
Financial independence, financial completion, financial, like she can afford a roof over her head, as I said. She doesn't need to beg. She is not dependent upon her father, brother, son, or husband all her life.
Right.
So this is what when you change this dynamics, you will see it will change the dynamics of the woman. This age old, what we call the rona dhona, the cruelty that they face, they're thrown out of their houses, they're living at their parents or with their brother or some relative because nobody will keep them, or they have 4 kids or whatever. This all will change, will bring betterment to the welfare of the women, with 50% of the population, welfare of the families. Because a woman makes a family.
Right. But here, do you not feel then to better implement this law, we need to have the society on board at large, which of course involves community outreach, which of course involves involving the community leaders at large, and by virtue of what Yameen was saying, even including media that way too, because the media itself, it needs to educate people about the importance of such progressive and much needed laws too.
I totally agree with you. You have to bring them on board, and the first people to bring on board are the men. Everybody has to support this law.
Right, madam. To which you wanted to add something?
Awareness campaigns, educational programs, even TV commercials, dramas, movies, all can collectively play a role in kind of changing that mindset that exists regarding, you know, divorce and stereotypes that pertain within the society relating to divorcees. Sort of amalgamating these different sectors of society will surely be able to kind of validate this law and implement it in a better way within our society.
Right, because I think it goes back to the basics that when we do talk about laws are brought so as to change societal attitudes. So on the converse, when laws are actually passed and they are promulgated, to implement them we need to change our societal attitudes. Sir, coming towards you here, I would want you to add to this. Overall, you know, if we are to wrap up today's conversation, what advice would you give to either the family or the friends of a divorced couple, especially when it comes to helping them rehabilitate rehabilitate back in the society when it comes to reducing that devastating psychological impact that a trauma-induced divorce may have otherwise had on them.
Right, and I think when you have a relative or a friend who's going through this, the immediate reaction is to try to help and solve. That's how we are designed as human beings.
True.
And research has shown that that's not helpful for the person who is going through a traumatic or a painful experience. So the advice that I would like to share as an ending note on this, understand what the person is going through,
right,
and spend more energy on that rather than giving solutions. Because giving solutions can come across as patronizing, it might come across as trivializing their issue, coming from a place of pity, which further kind of reinforces all of those negative elements that you just talked about. So while it sounds simple, it is hard to do, and it has very, very powerful healing effects.
Right, sir, your point is noted. On which I'll come to you, Yameen, and before we wrap up today's conversation, I think here we must also talk about the extremely important role of educators and Pakistan's education system in this regard too. So overall, when it comes to having those open and honest conversations regarding the issues that couples do face during the subsistence of a marriage and of course post-divorce too, what are the changes that you as an educator feel need to be made in our education system so as to perhaps better sensitize children or even teachers for that matter about the same, because ultimately this will not only give them a better understanding of marital problems but perhaps in a way also reduce divorce?
So to me, I think that there is a dire need of curriculum development to include sensitive topics like divorce and post-divorce management within the curriculum, so as to educate the students that no, it is not a stigma, it is not something negative. There might be a possibility that things might not work out between two people, and it is okay to move out, and it might also have positive prospects for the children as well, so that the children that have acquired this negative mindset towards divorce from that social conditioning is then shunned, and they do get to see the other side of the picture as well, that it might actually help
it
the
might
two
them
people
help it might actually
proceed in
help
life.
heal them too, and I think you would agree with me on this
That's
because
right.
they would
Yes.
be more sensitized about the nature of the issue
Exactly.
as well.
So for example, while I was teaching a student in grade 7, she was appearing to be very distant in the class and all. Having an individual meeting with her, she told me that her parents are going through something that is very difficult for her to deal with, and then when I asked her, she was saying that there are a lot of disputes between them, and now they are filing for divorce. That made her feel very distant and very disoriented in the class. So I arranged a meeting with the psychotherapist that is within the school, the counselor. She talked it out. She actually helped her understand that them being separated will eventually lead to peace within the household, and they'll be better able to co-parent the
And
children.
these are things which are extremely important, because you see a lot of times an issue which we often ignored is the way divorce then impacts children, and I think people like yourself, educators like yourself, are in that important position so as to help them heal. And if we work towards a curriculum reform, something that you very rightly so pointed, I think we can perhaps do just that. Although here again, I feel that teacher training in itself, that is extremely important.
Is an
as
important
well.
tool.
Right, Jameen, your point is noted. Coming towards you, Ms. Fawzia, and before we wrap up today's conversation, my last question to you would be that overall, when we do talk about changing our societal attitudes so as to ensure that yes, women do get their rights post-divorce, more particularly, especially when it comes to upholding their property rights, what are the issues that FOSPA, your own office, does face in this regard, and how do you, in the course of then facing such challenges, overcome them? Because at the end of the day, we also need to appreciate this very simple fact, which is that when it comes to doing away with all these issues, we have to have a social angle to them. The way a society looks at divorce will be determinative of how easily the divorced couple will actually come out of their trauma. So in this regard, what would your message be?
Unfortunately, in Pakistan and in many conservative societies, there is still a basic resistance to giving the property rights, especially inheritance property, to women. And in many of the cases that come to our office or otherwise in society, we notice that there is an outright denial. Along with that denial comes the desire and the ability to use force in the case of that denial. In the Federal Ombudsperson Secretariat, when we get women's property rights issues, initially there is resistance, there is denial, there is some aggression also. However, it is not a big problem. Also, with the assistance of the DC's office and with CDA's office, we are able to get reports rapidly. And with the assistance of the police, we are able to give possession also. And the threats or the aggression, I would say, I haven't received too many direct threats, but I have received aggression, or we have received aggression, and those can be taken care of. However, the lack of knowledge of one's rights, especially among women, is a problem. I feel that even among our educated men and women in general, there is a lack of knowledge of their own rights, especially among women. And because of the social pressure that women should give up their rights in favor of their brothers if they want to have their support going forward, women are reluctant. From your platform, I'd like to ask, or rather urge, all the women and men to assert their rights, and to not only give rights but to take rights, and government institutions will support them. In the case of a divorce, unfortunately the regime still does not provide very clear rights to women. However, our judiciary has been recognizing the value of women's unpaid work in divorce, and in the landmark case judgment called Bilkis Fatma, Justice Kekaus of the Lahore High Court held that in determining the consideration for Hula, a judge may take into consideration reciprocal benefits received by the husband, and continuous living together also may be a benefit received. And it's taken us over 50 years, but now, for instance, the Lahore High Court has developed the principle of reciprocal benefits in later cases. Similarly, the Peshawar High Court and the Sindh High Court have also endorsed this principle. And if we want, there are various ways in which that compensation for living together continuously, doing unpaid work, can become the basis for compensation to a woman in the case of no-fault divorce.
And at a very basic level, something that I would want to add to what you already said is the fact that we do need to, as a society, then redefine our family and support systems overall too. On which note, I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, Ms. Huma. Thank you so much, Assam Saab. Thank you so much, Ms. Yameen. And thank you so much, Ms. Fauzia, for your time today. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about post-divorce as a social issue. In this regard, we also spoke about the need for there to be perhaps law reform, law reform at a very basic level, which then ensures that women are not only given financial compensation but also an equitable share when it comes to distribution of their matrimonial assets. In this regard, something that we do need to ensure as a Pakistani society is a very simple fact, which is that we need to, at a very basic level, redefine our family and social support system so as to better help those people who do come across such traumatic experiences and to better integrate back into the society. Thank you for watching The Society. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.